Hi guys and welcome back to the Mighty Blues. My name is of course Cameron. Welcome back today to another live stream. It is the game review. Everton 0, Manchester United 3 at Goodison Park on Sunday. A disappointing result, a disappointing second half performance for me, and a lot of things to be considered coming out of the back of the game. Let's address the elephant in the room before we go any further into this live stream. Yes, I currently sound like a teenager going through the change at the moment. The reason for this is because I woke up on Monday morning with some form of throat infection. It has got a name. I've completely forgotten the name of it, but I've completely lost my voice, partly because of the screaming and shouting on Sunday afternoon that I'm sure a lot of us did, and partly because it was absolutely freezing cold and I sat in that freezing cold for a number of hours watching a game of football. So yeah, you'll have to put up with this for the moment. It doesn't seem like it's going to go away anytime soon, and unfortunately we tried to make a few other arrangements, but we couldn't come to anything, and I didn't want to leave you without a review. I didn't want to just go cold turkey and go away for a few days without any real explanation. So this mightn't be as in-depth as the usual reviews are. It mightn't be as long as the usual reviews are. I might miss a few things out, and if I have, it's not because I don't want to talk about them or because I said Everton would win this game comfortably and we didn't. It's simply because, as you can tell, I'm struggling to even barely hold a conversation at this moment for more than a minute. So, if there's a voice break, if it doesn't sound great, I apologise about that one, and I'm going to get as much rest as I can over the next few days, and hopefully by Friday, by the time we come to do the preview to the Forest game, hopefully everything's okay, and it's all sorted, and I sound somewhat more like a 25-year-old man as opposed to a 14-year-old boy. But we'll have to move on with it. As I said, the review has got to be done, and unfortunately, voice or no voice, we have to sit down and we have to talk about this game of football. So yeah, as I said, not how we all expected it to go. Was it not how we'd all planned for it to go? Obviously, the build up to this game had been one that had been going on for ever since the points deduction was announced. Really, the points deduction was announced, I think, 10 days prior to the game on Sunday, and from that moment on, all eyes were on this game, all eyes were on Goodison Park, all eyes were on the reaction of the Evertonians. How were Evertonians going to react to the news? How were we going to demonstrate our discontent and our disgust at such a disgraceful punishment? And therefore, it builds up a suspenseful sort of storyline that in the majority of cases, had Everton winning this game, had Everton beaten Manchester United, one of the biggest clubs in the world, a club that is £1 billion in debt, got a squad worth £1 billion, and really putting a finger up to the Premier League and saying, there you go, you're not gonna keep us down, you can put us down, but we'll get up and we'll go again. And unfortunately, it didn't quite pan out like that. It panned out, this game, very similar to a lot of games Everton have played in this season, and similar to a lot of games at the beginning of the season as well. I compared this one to the Luton game. I compared it to the not Sheffield United. I compared it to the Wolves game. I compared it to the Fulham game. And when I did that, I had a lot of Man United fans in the comment section saying how disrespectful that was to compare the biggest club in the world to, sides like Luton and Fulham, etc. But the comparison was more about how in those games Everton were the much better team. Everton were dominant, certainly in the first half. Everton had a number of opportunities, and Everton failed to score in any of those games and ultimately ended up losing them. And for me, Sunday was very, very similar to that. Whilst we had a lot of opportunities in that first half, whilst Manchester United were incredibly clinical as well, the chances that they had, they took. I still think had Everton had been, not even a little bit more clinical, just, being what we expect them to be in front of goal in that first 45 minutes, and even, have been what we've been for the last 5 or 6 weeks, then I think we go in 3 or 4-1 up at half time, and there's not even any real worry about losing the game. So I understand, as I said, people saying, oh, you can't be disrespectful, this is Man United, etc., etc. The reality of the situation is Everton should have gone in 3 or 4-1 up at half-time on Sunday, and we didn't. And because of that, the pressure started to pile on, and something that I spoke about an immense amount of times during the first few weeks of the season is how every time we get an opportunity and we miss it, the next opportunity has got double the pressure. So we miss one shot in the first 10 minutes of the game, then the next time somebody has a shot, there's double the pressure on them because we missed the first one. If they then miss that second shot, the next time somebody has a shot, there's double the pressure on them because the first two have been missed. And that just carries on and carries on and carries on up to a point where, there's that much pressure on the situation that you're unable to score, your heads drop, you lose a bit of faith, and ultimately, you go on and win the game. And, I think in normal circumstances, we probably look at this game and go, do you know what? We've been beaten by Manchester United. It's not the worst thing in the world in terms of it's not the most embarrassing situation to be in. There are, as I said, a football team with over £1 billion, players in there with 60, 70, 80, 90 million pounds. And, they were one of the top clubs in the form table. I think they were top of the form table going into this game. And, as I said, if we hadn't have been hit by that point deduction, we'd have probably sat there and go, do you know what? We've beaten Palace, we've beaten West Ham, we've beaten Brentford, we've beaten Bournemouth, all in the last sort of 6 weeks. Yes, we've lost to Manchester United at Goodison Park, but we can accept that and we can move on from that fairly quickly because, we've been in a good reign of form ourselves, and hopefully we can put it to the back of our minds and move on. But what that points deduction has done is something that hasn't seemed to be taken into consideration by anyone in the footballing world over the last 2 weeks or so, because all I've heard from non-Evertonians is, well, they shouldn't really be moaning because A, they broke the rules, which we know, again, is something that can be highly argued in terms of whether or not the punishment meets the crime. But something that's really, really frustrated me an awful lot over the course of the last sort of 2 weeks is this weird sort of notion that opposition fans are coming up with that, well, it's the best season to get a 10-point deduction because you're not going to get relegated because there's teams that are far worse than you in this division. And that, for me, is just completely baffling because I don't see any world in which there is a good season to receive a 10-point deduction for something that, as I said, is completely unjust considering, the rule that was broken by Everton. But what people seem to be forgetting is whilst Everton still might be a better side than Luton and Sheffield United and Burnley and Bournemouth and, Palace or whoever else, people aren't taking into consideration the psychological effect that having 10 points deducted off you can do to a team who are in the position that Everton are in. You are forgetting that these players, the majority of these players, have been through at least one relegation battle with the football club, some two, over the course of the last couple of seasons. And when you are in that situation and you are emotionally invested and you survive by the skin of your teeth, not just one season, but 2 seasons on the bounce. You survive by, as I said, an unbelievable comeback one year, and then the following year, a world-class finish that come out of nowhere. And then you go into the following season, and you're playing well, and you're winning games, and there's a significant gap between, yourselves being Everton, and the teams that are below you, the teams that are struggling. There's a significant gap, and all of a sudden, everybody starts to feel a bit calmer. Everybody starts to feel a bit less anxious. Everybody starts to feel a bit less worried, and the players start to feel a bit happier. They're enjoying their football a lot more. The manager's enjoying it a lot more. And then you get hit by that 10-point deduction, and it absolutely smacks you in the face. You cannot sit there and tell me that those players would not have had a negative reaction to that. You cannot sit there and tell me that those players would have gone, well, do you know what? It is what it is. We'll move on and we'll continue the way in which we were, even though the manager might say that they're doing that, even though the players themselves might say that they're doing that. I can utterly guarantee that they aren't, because it's like it's like you are in a room with somebody and they say, right, here's your wife of 30 years who you've grown up with, who you love, who you've got children with, who you want to spend the rest of your life with. You adore this person. And here's three quite nice looking young supermodels who are, the top of whatever the magazines are or the websites are. They are, the three highest rated supermodels in the world. Your wife has been cheating on you for 15 years with somebody else behind your back, but it's the best time for your wife to be cheating on you because there's three supermodels that you can go out with. It doesn't work like that. You cannot just strip the emotion out of it. You cannot strip the pain. You cannot strip the disappointment and the anxiety away from it just because there's other teams in this league that may not be as good as Everton on paper. The reality of the situation is Everton are in the relegation zone now, and because of the way in which the results went this weekend, Everton are now 5 points outside of the relegation zone. Luton currently sit with 9th, and 5 points isn't a huge amount of points when you consider we're only in November, but it's still a considerable gap between, us where we are and the team that we're chasing to get out of this position. And as I said, you sometimes we forget as football fans because of this weird footballing world that we live in, and it is a really, really weird footballing world that we live in. We forget that these footballers are human beings. Yes, they're paid a ridiculous amount of money. Yes, they do a job that the majority of us would absolutely love to do and would do for free. Yes, they are incredibly privileged, but they are still human beings. And to those Everton players who, by the way, have got no fault, through no fault of their own, have been punished. For Sean Dyche is the Everton manager who, through no fault of his own, has been punished. For Everton fans who, through no fault of their own, have been punished. It has an effect. It has an effect on me. I sat here on Saturday and said, I'm not bothered about relegation. I don't care about the Premier League table. And then I sat there on Sunday and I was looking at the table and I was panicking and I was worrying and I was all of a sudden, looking at certain teams' next fixtures and wanting certain teams to lose and looking at when we play them so we can get an advantage on them. I don't know if I can cope with that stress and anxiety for a third year on the spin. And the players will be feeling exactly that. And what makes this situation 100 times worse is that it's through no fault of their own. Those players dug deep, worked hard, found a system, and played the system well. The manager, ultimately found the way in which it worked for him, at home, away from home, and it was working. And the players got their head down, they worked hard, and they performed. And now, through something that is completely out of the hands of the manager and the players, now we're thrust back into this position that we were, 12 months ago, 24 months ago. And it almost feels like all of that positive, sort of change, all of that positivity that has happened in the last 5 or 6 weeks has been completely pointless. And can you imagine the effect that has on those players as human beings? That they've finally come out of the shit. They've finally come away from that awful position and that awful feeling of losing every week and, looking at the table every 10 minutes. And when they've come out of it and they're finally starting to do well, they're thrust back in it for something that is completely out of their control. As I said, imagine it yourself. These people are human beings. Whilst they might get paid an awful lot of money, whilst they might be very privileged, they're human beings. If I, in my job, was, had a really bad couple of years, and then started to find my feet a little bit, started to do well, started to work hard, started to look forward to going to work, motivating myself and actually enjoying my job, and then my boss come in and went, right, you're getting a deduction for no reason of your fault, and you're back to where you were 2 years ago when you hated the place, I'd probably turn around and go, do you know what, I'm done, I'm out of here, I can't do that anymore. So it cannot be underestimated, and I will not let it be underestimated how difficult of a position this is for those players and that manager. It's an incredibly difficult position for us fans. As you can see, I've given myself laryngitis or whatever it's called by screaming and shouting at the match on Sunday. I've got impetigo on my chin, which is a skin infection. I've come out of Sunday's game as if I've just been to war. And I don't mean that in a cringy, I went to war for my club way. I'm just, look at how physically I'm affected by one game of football on Sunday afternoon. So you cannot underestimate how impactful that points deduction has been on the feeling around the place and the mentality. And I know the players will come out and say, we still know what the goal is, etc., etc., etc. We're still motivated. It's not affected us, all of this, but they can't exactly come out, can they, and say, in all honesty, we're fucking gutted and we can't be arsed anymore. They're not going to do that. So whilst they might be saying it hasn't affected them and they're still positive, etc., 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 we know it's affected them. You could tell on Sunday by watching the game of football, it has affected them. All of a sudden, games go from being opportunities to win and climb the table, and there's almost an excitement around the game of football. I think Andy Gray said this. Somebody tweeted me today saying Andy Gray summed it up. Games that we games that we would have had confidence to win now have pressure. The mentality shifts again. Utterly destroyed the hard work Dyche has done to restore confidence to the players and fans. Absolutely, and that is spot on. I sat here before the United game and didn't take into consideration what the what the impact of the points reduction would be, and that's why I sat here and said I expect us to win that game. The same reason I sat here and said 3 weeks before or 2 weeks before I expect us to beat Brighton and we should have beaten Brighton. We were very unfortunate. They scored in the last 5 minutes to equalise, and that was because I was confident going into those games. I felt Everton were playing well. I felt Everton were performing. I felt there was a good feeling around the club. And I was confident that we could go into those games and win them. Now, the whole mentality is switched. We're now looking at games, panicking again. We're now looking at games with pressure on them. If we wouldn't have had that points deduction, I'd be going into next Saturday against Forest away thinking we should beat these and we should beat them comfortably. And I expect us to beat them. And I think the players would have gone in with that mentality and we'd have come out with a positive result. Similarly, like we did to Palace, I said I expect us to get something. The players went out feeling the same and they got something. Is that the same now? Because as much as we might want to sit here and say, well, the goal hasn't changed, and as much as the manager might want to sit here and say, the goal's still the same, the feeling around the club is still the same, etc., 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 the reality of the situation is it has changed, because there's no way a 10-point deduction and putting us back in the danger zone hasn't had a negative impact on people. Whether it be fans, whether it be players, whether it be the manager, of course it has. It has on us. So, if we're sitting here protesting and marching against the Premier League and holding up banners and holding up pieces of card, and that's how much it's affected us, think of how much it's affected the players. Now, I do just want to say to anybody watching who is only just joined us, I am currently suffering from, is it laryngitis, I think? I don't know, my mum told me before, but I can't remember. Basically, Sunday has written me off. I shouldn't really be doing this video now. It's not going to be a particularly long one. I tried to make other arrangements, but unfortunately it wouldn't work, and I didn't want to not provide a video. I didn't want to get to Thursday, Friday, and we've not done a review to this game. So what I'm probably going to do this video, rest up for a couple of days, and then try and come back on Friday for the preview. But I didn't not want to do it, and as soon as I found out that it was either me do it or it doesn't get done, I sort of had to do it. So yeah, you'll just have to put up with me voice, or don't watch this one. But for my OCD and autism, this video is being done. Neil says, get some rest. Cheers, mate. Wanderlust says, I'm actually kind of surprised you're allowed. To be honest, don't blame me if you rest. Listen, I've got a lot to say about this game, and unfortunately, and very frustratingly, I won't be able to say it all in this video because I don't think my body will allow me to. But I have got a lot to say about this game because I think there's a lot of significance with the performance, and I think there's a lot of significance with the results, as we've already spoken about the mentality of the players going into this game. I think you could tell in that second half that players were frustrated, players were annoyed, and it seemed like there was an overall feeling amongst the players and the fans of what the fuck's the point, especially after that penalty was given, and obviously we'll go on to talk about that in a bit more detail later on in the video. But one thing I do want to say before we go into this any further is I want to address a chant that was made at Goodison on Sunday and is made every year around this time by near enough every single away section. You all know what I'm talking about. If you follow us on Twitter, you will have seen I've had a number of, let's say, discussions with different people on Twitter today and across the last few days about this chant, the Feed the Scousers chant. Now, the reason I want to bring this up is because it says, do you genuinely have autism? Yeah, I do, yeah. Not as high as a lot of people, and I'm probably not high enough to be noticed, but yeah, is the answer. Again, the reason I bring this up specifically is because there's a video going around of a very famous YouTuber, Angry Ginge, who has risen to fame in the last sort of few months or so. Gaming videos, Man United fan, goes to all the Man United games, no problem. Actually seemed like a relatively decent kid from what I'd seen of him prior to the weekend. Comes to Goodison, does a vlog of the game from the United end and takes part in the Feed the Scousers chant. Films himself, puts it on YouTube to his hundreds, thousands followers, however many followers he's got. And obviously this catches attention and people start talking about it. Now, I have preached this for a while. I've said this numerous times on this channel. I've said this numerous times on Twitter. The Feed the Scousers chant is as bad as any other tragedy chant in football. And whilst it is absolutely disgusting and, vile and unacceptable to chant about any other tragedy, whether it be within football or out of football, at a game of football, it is also vile and inappropriate and unacceptable to chant about a poverty crisis that has plagued this country for however many years. The response I got was, get over it. It's only a football chant. It's only banter. Get over yourself. But you could say that about anything, couldn't you? That, for me, is opening the door for people to come out in a game of football, say anything they like, say what they like, say it about poverty, say it about a footballing disaster, say it about anything, and then just say, well, it's only banter, so, you can't be offended. The reality of the situation is, it is a disgusting chant that is mocking people that are struggling, mocking people that at this time of year will be unable to feed their families, will be unable to heat their homes, will be unable to buy Christmas presents for their children. It is mocking people that are struggling, not only in the city of Liverpool. I know the chant directly mocks the city of Liverpool, but it's mocking everybody generally who struggles. And I guarantee you there will have been a number of people in that Manchester United away end who were singing that chant who either are directly or know somebody that struggles from poverty in some form, whether it be because they're not being paid enough by their job, they can't heat their homes because the prices have gone through the roof, food prices have gone through the roof, and this notion that, chants about, let's say, the Munich air disaster, for example, because it's in conversation about Manchester United, is much more unacceptable than the Feed the Scousers chant because people died in Munich. I agree. Nobody in any form of life, whether you're at a football game or not, should be chanting about Munich, should be chanting about Hillsborough, should be chanting about any disaster. Nobody should be chanting about any disaster because it's disgusting. Innocent people lost their lives and it's not something to be laughed at or glorified. Do you know how many innocent people lose their lives to poverty every single year? Not just in Liverpool, but in this country, in the world. Do you know how many people over the course of this winter will lose their lives, homeless people, because it's -5 degrees outside in the middle of the night and they will freeze to death? A lot. So don't come at me with the people died in other disasters. So then that makes it much worse. This isn't a case of what's worse and what's not worse. This isn't a case of ranking, from 1 to 5 how bad certain football chants are. This is a case of, much like chants about Hillsborough or Heysel or Munich or anything else, the Feed the Scousers chant is simply unacceptable. Unacceptable. I was called out today, by the way. I'm not going to name the person because he doesn't deserve the attention. I was called out today by an Evertonian who called me out for calling Angry Ginge out. Now, Angry Ginge is the YouTuber who put the video up of himself doing the chant, and I simply quoted it by saying, really disappointed at this. Usually like this kid's content. Seemed like a decent kid. He's let himself down here. And I was told that I was a bully because I was inciting people to then go on and pile on him for singing that chant. So hang on. I'm the bully for calling out somebody who is inappropriately singing something that is affecting hundreds of thousands of people every single day and killing people every single day. A crisis that is everlasting and who knows if it will ever end, and is always ruining people's lives. And I was called out for calling somebody out for mocking it. I was called a bully. I was called a faceless bully, which is funny because I've done 1,400 videos on YouTube where my face is in nearly every one of them. So, if you follow us on Twitter, there's a good chance you've seen my face. The reality is, much like chants about Hillsborough, or about Munich, or about Heysel, or about anything else, the Feed the Scousers chant is simply unacceptable and should not be taken as banter or it's a football chant, get over it, because that just opens the door to say, well, you can say what the fuck you like at a game of footy because people will just have to get over it. And let me just remind you something else as well. If you're watching this and you're thinking, get over it, Cam, why you're offended by it, just because you personally aren't offended by something does not mean that it's the right thing to do and does not mean that it's not offensive. I don't know who Manchester United play at the weekend next week. Let's have a little Google search. Manchester United are away to Newcastle. Now, if the Newcastle fans all turned up next week and started singing Munich chants, I wouldn't be personally offended by it because I've got no personal connection to the Munich air disaster or to Manchester United. But it doesn't mean that it would be acceptable. Just because I'm not personally offended by it, I would be disgusted by it and I would think they were vile and needed punishing for that. So just because you personally aren't offended by something doesn't mean that it's all right to mock it. And the Feed the Scousers chant needs to stop because it's disgraceful. It is highly offensive and quite frankly, it's mocking a crisis that is everlasting, is ongoing, and is harming thousands of people every single fucking year. And it's disgusting to think that people... And the worst thing about it is, I get it, people say it's banter, it's not that deep, it's not that serious. As I said, the same could be said about any other disaster chant in football. I'm sure the people that were singing about Munich when they were found out, or Hillsborough, I'm sure they said, it's just a laugh, get over it. I'm sure they never meant any, but that's not the point. That doesn't mean it's acceptable. That doesn't mean they should be able to do it. The point is, and the most disappointing thing is Manchester is such a working class city. Manchester is a city that struggles with poverty. Manchester is a city that has to deal with food banks, similarly to Liverpool. And what that chant does is you are effectively taking the piss out of your own people's situations. And what it also does is it feeds into the narrative that I believe, now people won't agree with this, but I believe this Conservative government have wanted for years, which is to turn the poor against each other, have them fight against each other for the scraps whilst they all sit in their big ivory towers with all of the produce and whatever else. Football is a working class sport which was taken over by the non-working class, taken over by the upper class. And now what is happening is the working class are fighting between each other and singing things like this. It's just poor. It's poor. It's not acceptable. And what I would say is to Manchester United fans, think about what you would think and how you would like it if the whole of Newcastle end started singing about Munich. You would be disgusted, and rightly so, as would everybody else. Just have a think next time before you start opening your mouth and think about the meanings. And this isn't just to Angry Gins, because he's posted an apology video and he's come out and he said that, he understands it now and he won't sing it again. Whether he's done that because he's been caught out and he's been criticised, or whether he's done it because he genuinely means it, who knows? It's not really relevant. The point is that that is unacceptable, in the same way as any other tragedy chanting is unacceptable. It's not a case of what's worse. It's not a case of, well, Hillsborough's worse because of this, or Munich's worse, or tragedy chanting's worse. They are all disgraceful, unacceptable, and shouldn't be happening. And Zybo, it's not political at all. I hate when you call somebody out for something that's wrong and people say, stop being political. We're getting to a point in the society now where dangerous people will commit dangerous crimes, and people will come out and say, oh, stop being so political, having a go at him. It's really, really dangerous, this, really dangerous. The reality of the situation is, it shouldn't be happening, it shouldn't be allowed, and it should be treated in the same way as any other tragedy chanting is treated. And that is my say on it. And as for being called a faceless bully, well, firstly, that's the first time I've ever been called a bully for calling out people that are mocking poverty. Secondly, it's also the first time I've been called faceless when I'm sat here with laryngitis, can barely speak, doing me 9th video of the last 7 days. So, yeah, anyway, I just wanted to have my word on that, because that's one of the things that I really wanted to talk about today. And, I thought if I'm going to do a video and I'm only going to get half an hour or 40 minutes, then I want to make sure that this is a chunk of it, because this is an important thing to talk about, and it needs to have the attention put on it. If you are enjoying, I don't know why you would be, because I can barely speak and you're probably annoyed by it, but if you are enjoying, please hit the like button. Please subscribe as well. That would have been a huge, huge amount to me. But yeah, like I said, not even just an anti-Angry Ginge thing. He was just, he just happened to be somebody famous in the crowd who was singing it. It's poor. It's really poor. Sing whatever you like. If you're gonna have banter, sing the whole sign on and stuff like that. Even that is mocking an employment crisis, but mocking poverty and people, and the excuses I had over the weekend was, well, people died in those other disasters, so that makes it worse, as if people don't die of starvation and homelessness every single day. It's just poor. It's really, really poor. Anyway, moving on. Let's talk about the game. Well, firstly, let's talk about the build-up to the game. Absolutely unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable from everybody involved. The 1878 group, who of course were, the big sort of organisers of the protests, of the demonstrations, of the flags, of the cards that we all held up. I wish I had one to show now. It's downstairs and I don't really want to run downstairs and grab it, but I'll bring it up for Friday's video and hang it on the green screen there so you see it. Yeah. As I said, huge shout out to the 1878, Katie and everybody involved there, and everybody that was involved in, organising that, everybody involved in handing the leaflets out as well. I know that they were Blues that just volunteered to go down and stand in the cold for an extra 2 or 3 hours and hand out leaflets. So huge shout out to all of them who were involved in that. It was perfect. The demonstration was perfect. The walk to the ground was perfect. The noise was perfect. The leaflets were perfect. As I said in the instant match reaction, I did have a little concern that the message maybe wasn't communicated to everybody, only because, not through any fault of the 1878 or anything like that, only because obviously a lot of this stuff was organised on social media. A lot of this a lot of the showing of the where the cards were going to be, where you can pick one up, where you can go and get X, Y, and Z, was all on social media. We done the video on Saturday to try and highlight to a bit of more of a wider audience where you can go and pick up the cards, where the banners, what banners are going to be held, so people had a little bit more of a knowledge. Because the reality is, whilst the large portion of Evertonians are not every Evertonian is on social media. You know, I sit next to my dad, who is 60 odd years old, never been on social media. I sit in a group of people. I would say, out of the 50 people that sit around me, maybe 30 people that sit around me, I'd say 80% of them are not on social media. I don't know that for sure. I'm just guessing, but I would guess, due to ages and never really hearing them talk about anything like that, I would guess that most of them people, not that there's an age limit to social media, by the way, but you know what I mean. My dad, for example, always says, I'm too old for social media. It won't give me anything positive. I don't want to go on it. And I know there's a lot of people that have that same opinion. So I was a little bit concerned going into this that there would be a gap in the fan base that just didn't know this was going on and therefore didn't have a card or couldn't pick one up, etc., etc., etc. That wasn't the case. Everybody involved, as I said, the 1878 and everybody else, did a perfect job at communicating this to every Evertonian, whether you're on Twitter, whether you're on Facebook, whether you're on Instagram, whether you're on YouTube, or whether you're not on anything. Everybody knew what was going on. Everybody knew there was demonstrations. Everybody knew where to pick a card up from. Everybody knew what the situation was. You held it up when the anthem was on. You held it up on the 10th minute. It was perfect. I have never quite seen anything like what I saw firstly, when the Premier League team brought on the big board that they put on the pitch before the game with the badges on. They were booed unbelievably by everyone in the stadium. Now, obviously, it's not their fault personally. They probably just carry the banner in and carry the banner out, but they work and they represent the organisation that we were protesting against, so it is what it is. They have to deal with that. But when Z-Cars was played, you know, as I said, don't get me wrong, before the game, amazing. I was part of the march. Everybody, everywhere had a leaflet, and if you didn't have one, you only had to walk 10 yards in front of you and you could pick one up. But when Z-Cars hit, and then that Premier League anthem started to hit, Z-Cars was cheered. Of course it was. There was a few groans, naturally, because we knew that there was booing at some point, and I think people just got a little bit excited with it. But the moment that the announcer announced about the fair play handshake, I can't remember hearing quite a noise like that. It was unbelievable. It was spectacular. The whole stadium booing at the top of their lungs, singing Premier League, corrupt as fuck. It was amazing. It's part of the reason why I can't speak today. We're now on Tuesday. This was 2 days ago, and I still cannot speak properly, as you can see, because of how much noise I made and everybody else made on Sunday afternoon. Let me have another drink because I'm struggling here. I'm struggling. So yeah, it was unbelievable, and as I said, I've not watched it back. I've not seen what it was like on the telly. I believe Sky, tried to edit out a lot of the cards. I believe Sky tried to mute the sound and played a different sound. As I said on Friday, in my opinion, or Saturday, in my opinion, Sky are as culpable as the Premier League. And I think anybody that thinks that Sky are completely innocent in this and pay hundreds of millions of pounds a year to watch their product get dismantled and taken apart, and think that they're going to be happy with that, and they're going to show that, and they're going to be, welcoming to that. Let's think logically about this now, not taking away any conspiracy or any, hate campaign. Let's just think logically about it now. That doesn't make any sense. But yeah, it was perfect. It was absolutely perfect. The noise was perfect. The cards on show were perfect. The booing, the chanting was absolutely brilliant. And it all led up to that moment. The fans had done what was expected of them. The fans had done what we'd said we were going to do, what we planned to do, what we all spoke about doing for the last 2 weeks. Now it was up for the players to do their job and, put in a performance that we can walk away with and say, there you go, stick that Premier League, do one, we're not going anywhere. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. And look, before I go into this, I just want to say fair play to Manchester United. Manchester United ultimately had the job to do. They went out there, they did it, and, you know, you as a United fan, I suppose you can't really ask much more of them. Do I think they were great? No. Do I think Everton were the better team in the first half? Absolutely. Do I think Manchester United are a particularly good side? Not really. I think they're all right, but they're nowhere near a top four side. And if they finish in the top four this season, I'll be hugely surprised. But they had a job to do, and ultimately they went out and did it. What I think killed the game off for me, and I said this in the reaction, and it was probably the best thing that could have happened to Manchester United on Sunday, was the fact that within the opening 2 minutes of the game, they'd scored one of the best goals I've ever seen, and probably going to win goal of the season, and it completely deflated the entirety of Goodison Park. I mean, the whole build-up to the game, the whole, anticipation to the game was like one big, huge balloon. The anger, the frustration, the chanting, the booing, the screaming was all one big balloon. And that Garnacho goal was like a pin to it. It just popped it straight away. And whilst I think the crowd got back up and reacted well and started singing again and started getting behind the players again, I do think there was an overall feeling of, fucking hell, we didn't need that. As if that's happened on today of all days. It was I've got no complaints about it. It was a truly wonderful finish, lovely bit of skill, and he probably never do it again in his career, but that doesn't matter. He had one opportunity to do it, and he did. I've seen some people talk about whether or not it's a fluke. It doesn't matter what body part it's come off. He has absolutely meant to overhead kick that and meant for it to go in the back of the net, and it did. So no part of that is a fluke. A fluke is when you hit a ball and you expect it to go one way and it goes somewhere else and it goes in and you go, oh, that was a bit lucky. He meant to overhead kick that into the roof of the net. Whether he meant for it to hit his shin or his laces or his boot, it doesn't matter. It was a brilliant goal, and I've got no complaints with it. Huge credit to him for it. But it did, as I said, put a pin in that bubble, that atmosphere bubble that we'd created. And even though we picked it back up and, we done well to sort of get back, behind the lads and behind the team, it still was a difficult moment to come back from. And it added pressure. And as we said before, that's the situation Everton are in now. Without the points deduction, Everton might have gone, do you know what? That's a worldie, that. Forget about it. 0-0 starts again. But what it did now, because of the pressure, because of the anxiety, because of the, oh shit, if we don't win this, we stay in the relegation zone, it added pressure, and it made the situation 10 times worse, in my opinion. We then, to be fair, with a much better team throughout the remainder of the first half. I don't think I remember Manchester United having another clear opportunity. We had a number of chances. Dom had a couple of headers that he simply has got to do better with. One that he put over, one that he put straight into the keeper. Takore had one on the edge of the box that he should do much better with. Garnet Gay had one, which again, you would expect him to do more with, even though we know he's not great on the ball. Obviously, we had one off the line, and as I said before, with every chance that was missed, the pressure rose, and the pressure increased by double, because it felt once again very much like the games against Luton, against Wolves, against Fulham earlier on in the season, where, okay, we were having chances and we were the better team, but we weren't taking them, and we were missing really easy. I think I've seen a stat before that was something like Everton have had 120 odd shots on goal this season at Goodison and only scored 5 goals, something like that. And if that's true, that's absolutely horrific. Absolutely horrific if that's the case. But and it wouldn't surprise me, because once again, we had so many clear opportunities on Sunday and we didn't take any of them. And I think a combination of that and conceding the overhead kick in the opening 2 minutes just completely knocked the players for six. I think their confidence was on the floor. I think their focus was on the floor. And whilst they were working hard, they were running around, they were putting themselves about. I just don't think it was the same Everton that we seen 3 or 4 weeks ago, because they weren't as confident, they weren't as calm, they weren't as collected in front of goal, and the chances that we had, we missed. So that was a worry for me when we went in at half time. I think had we have gone in goalless at half time and having all of those chances and not scored, I think we'd have all gone, do you know what? This is here for the taking. This has got 1-0 Everton written all over it. But because we conceded so early on, that popped the bubble. And then we had so many big opportunities that we didn't take. I think it just done, it just didn't work for us whatsoever. I think there was an air of anxiety. There was an air of pressure. There was an air of, oh my God, this was the game that we absolutely didn't need to lose. This was the game that we wanted to make a statement in. And, we're losing and we're missing chances in it. We then come out in the second half. We have another couple of sort of half chances. And then the moment they get the penalty, it's game over for me. Is it a penalty? Yeah, it probably is. I've seen it back. Do I think it's soft? Yeah, I do think it's soft. But the reality is those penalties are given. And they're very often given against Everton. And yeah, I'm not going to spend 10 minutes, talking about Ashley Young, because A, I don't think my voice can take it, and B, I don't want to waste 10 minutes of my voice on Ashley Young. But one thing I will say is it's absolutely now time for him to come out of this team. He needs replacing, whether it's Patterson, whether it's Seamus. It's time for Ashley Young to be taken out, because he's been really poor for far too long, and he's made mistake after mistake after mistake and put us in really difficult situations time in and time out, and we can't do that anymore. And yeah, once Rashford steps up and take the penalty, I think, I said on Sunday that I felt it was an abysmal performance, and what I meant by that is I think as soon as the penalty went in, even though we had half an hour to get back in the game, and had we have scored, 5-10 minutes after the penalty, we might have had a chance of going and getting something out of the game. We never really looked like we could. The substitutions that were made didn't work. All right, Chimity had a go, but it didn't work. And yeah, I just think from that point on, it was almost like whatever. This is done now. Let's just worry about the next game. And that's really unfortunate, because I genuinely don't think that would have been the case had we have not had the points deduction. I really, really don't, and that for me is a bit of a worry. What we've got to do now as a fan base is get behind the players, get behind the team, get behind the manager, understand that it's not their fault, just like it's not our fault, it's not their fault. It's not Sean Dyche's fault. These players have worked their bollocks off over the last 3 months to get Everton in a position where we're not looking over our shoulder and we're not worrying. And through no fault of their own, we've been put back in that position. And now, as we always do, we've got to get behind them, we've got to support them, and we've got to show them that we're there for them, and we will always be as well. And we need to get back to winning ways as soon as possible. Absolutely, as soon as possible, because ultimately, the more we keep losing games, the more chances we keep missing, the worse this situation is going to get. And yeah, hopefully that changes next weekend. Referee was atrocious, but no surprises. Fully expected it from somebody with a corrupt Richard Masters in their ear. And yeah, it pretty much went like that. It wasn't, as I said, in isolation, it wasn't the worst, performance I've ever seen. We didn't take our chances. They took theirs. We lost the game, but the circumstance that Everton are in now just makes it feel 10 times harder and 10 times worse. And yeah, I think that's something that seriously has to be addressed, and something that's been massively overlooked recently. So there you go. Look, I'm going to leave it there. There's probably loads of stuff about the game that we haven't talked on, but as you can tell, I've been doing this for 50 minutes now, and I'm struggling. If you have enjoyed it, please leave a like. Don't forget to subscribe if you're new. We will definitely be back on Friday for the preview, even if I still sound like this. We'll be doing the preview. If I'm any better over the next couple of days, then we'll come back and we'll do another video as well. So, yeah, hit the subscribe button if you can. It would mean a huge, huge amount to me. If you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe as well. That would be great. Leave a like if you've enjoyed it. Big thank you all for watching, and we'll see you after.